What's an NSFW facts about a historical figures that we don't learn in school? Peter the Great scoured the Russian Empire in search of dwarfs and giants in an effort to breed a race of each. While he couldn't find enough giants, he found many dwarfs. He would bake a huge pie and have a dwarf get naked and wait inside it to jump out and scare guests. In addition to using them as regular stewards and servants and such. That was the tip of Peter's crazy. I'm imagining sweaty Frank Reynolds crawling out of a giant pie. And offering them all an egg in this trying time. Queen Victoria really loved having sex with her husband Prince Albert. Like, really loved sex with him. To the point that she was quite audible through doors and walls. Several times per day. They had 9 kids in 21 years. Can't get pregnant if you're pregnant. Victor Hugo was a very diligent visitor at the Parisian brothels. So much so that the day he was buried, all the Parisian brothel closed for the day so prostitutes could go to the funeral. This was in addition to his many mistresses, as well. He was apparently a force of nature in that department. I find this really charming, because it puts paid to the pop psychology theory that great artists become that way because they need a creative outlet as a substitute for their repressed sexuality. Here was a man who wrote novels, poems and plays, wielded a pretty mean pencil in drawings and had a career as a politician and member of parliament as well, and still had an amazing sex life. Greater than the pop psych theory, repressed sexuality really? My general sense was that painters and Frenchmen fuck everybody. Ben Franklin liked to stand nude in front of open windows. He also famously said, "Fart proudly," and wrote a treatise about why younger men should take older women as lovers. Ben Franklin was also a very well-known satirist, so it's hard to know when he was being serious or not. If I remember correctly, the "Fart proudly" essay was definitely a joke. He seemed pretty serious about old ladies. Experience is a good teacher. In the dark, they look the same. But the older ladies know what to do. All cats are gray in the dark. Because in every animal that walks upright, the deficiency of the fluids that fill the muscles appears first in the highest part. The face first grows lank and wrinkled, then the neck, then the breast and arms, the lower parts continuing to the last as plump as ever, so that covering all above with a basket, and regarding too only what is below the girdle, it is impossible of 2 women to know an old from a young one. And as in the dark all cats are gray, the pleasure of corporal enjoyment with an old woman is at least equal, and frequently superior, every knack being by practice capable of improvement. Old Mistress's Apologue, the 25th of June 1745. The Founding Fathers could outdrink any fraternity. After they signed the Declaration of Independence, they went to the bar and racked up a massive tab. If I remember correctly, I think it was about a bottle of whiskey, 2 bottles of wine, and 7 to 10 ales per person. I had a history teacher who said Washington was known as a 3-bottle man, meaning he could drink 3/5 of whiskey and not pass out. I heard he was 6'8" and weighed a fucking ton. He made love like an eagle falling out of the sky. And killed his sensei in a duel and never said why. Lyndon B. Johnson had a giant penis he was proud of. He nicknamed it Jumbo. He was a master manipulator. If someone was against his bills or he wanted their vote, he would crowd into their personal space and literally go nose to nose with someone to get them to give up just to get away. When he was president, he went even further. If a congressman was against his policies, LBJ would bring them up to the Oval Office for a meeting. Then about halfway through, he would rise up and continue talking to the congressman and beckon him to follow him. He would then give him the bathroom treatment. This would consist of him telling the congressman to stand outside the john while he would have himself a squat. And yes, he would talk over and want responses from the guy while there were grunts, farts, and splashes of him dropping his own personal depth charges. White House staff were used to this and would just sit there gazing at these young guys turning beet red and being utterly aghast at suffering through this to the point of them pretty much agreeing with anything to get away from this. It was a masterclass on making people change positions by pure embarrassment. It apparently tickled him to no end to basically bring these Ivy League, upper crust types down to earth through the most basic of acts and see what would crack first, their stubborn will or their sanity. It's funny, my CC professor brought that up about LBJ, him just leaning over your personal space. The pictures he included just made it more funny. Yep, he was famous, and infamous, for it. They called it the Johnson treatment, and it wasn't just the lean in. Johnson would know everything about his prey to work the deal. He would use cajoling, flattery about his work, threats, reminders of past favors, sometimes a subtle bit of bribery to trade the vote on the bill. Again, it was a total treatment, A couple of the old salts in Congress knew it and gave it right back, not budging an inch, and it wasn't surprising to see two congressmen almost within smooching distance during recess breaks. Supposedly Richard Russell, Georgia's senator and his main impediment to the Civil Rights Act, once told LBJ that, "It seems Lyndon likes his chili with onions after the treatment." But it got results. Bout near killed Johnson too from a heart attack in his 40s from overwork and bad habits. It is amazing what can be accomplished with an implied threat of imminent physical violence in a civilized setting. Edgar Allan Poe, male 27, married his slightly younger cousin, female 13. Yup. In Lolita, Nabokov has Humbert specifically cite Poe and a few other notable cases of famous guys getting away with being pedophiles. It helps connect the story to the wider criticism of society. He also cited Mediterranean fathers giving their daughters the old what for, so they were experienced when they were wed, I believe. Excuse me, what the fuck? Yup. I used to live in a part of the Balkans where it was a recent practice, not sure. Maybe 100 years ago, edit. The practice stopped by World War II, so even more recent. It's a tradition where basically fathers would even choose the bride as marriages were arranged and then have sex with her before his son, to test it. There are books in school we read, as local writers wrote them. I believe the one of many where I remember this from is Nasista Krov, Impure Blood, by Boris Stankovic. A true masterpiece, if you're into realism, that is. Definitely recommended, if you can find it in English, of course. And #X200B, edit. Have to add that the place this takes in is my hometown, Vranja. Deep south of Serbia, and it was and still is deeply influenced by the Turkish. They only left like 200 years ago and their influence in tradition is still strong down there. There are a lot of sad but true stories about forbidden loves and doomed causes. Anne Frank's journal, or at least the editions most commonly seen around the English-speaking world, is heavily censored by its publisher. In the versions that aren't censored, we can see that she was a teenager who unashamedly described her sexual and romantic attractions to both boys and girls, admitting to have asked to touch one of her friend's breast, before she went into hiding. Didn't her father censor it because he didn't want those parts published? He took out the more sexual parts, which makes sense since it's his daughter, and one part that was criticizing her mother. Yes, he did. I have an unpopular opinion about it. I think his wishes should have been honored. Her diary was her diary. There were parts of it that are pertinent to history, indeed necessary to history. But those parts weren't, and she wrote them with the expectations of privacy. Agreed. I think the publisher's decision to honor her father's request was the right one. The omitted sections aren't historically relevant and would very likely only be used to attack her credibility. Royal family members had people witness them having sex so they could confirm the legitimacy of the heir. Not sure if they still do it nowadays because there are DNA tests. And #X200B. Edit. Damn, I never knew this comment will get so much upvotes and comments. Thanks guys. This wasn't just for royals. It was a common marital tradition of the noble class in whole. It was used to solidify the marriage contract. In the Middle Ages you were able to null the marriage if the marriage was not consummated, as the whole purpose was heirs. You can still dissolve your marriage today because of that. Non-consumption of your marriage is a reason to get an annulment in the Catholic Church. Edit. Sorry, this non-native speaker meant consummation, which my mobile phone spell checker doesn't like. On the plus side, I got a few good chuckles from some of the replies correcting me. The word is consummation, but I'm sure eating out pussy is considered consumption and would make the marriage valid. You'll never get through marriage 101 if you don't do well on the oral. James Joyce wrote absolutely filthy letters to his wife Nora. He was one randy chap altogether. I looked them up out of curiosity, and because I read it other people should as well. What I managed to learn is James Joyce probably had a fart fetish. Part of letter dated December 6, 1909. The smallest things give me a great cockstand. A whorish movement of your mouth. A little brown stain on the seat of your white drawers. A sudden dirty word spluttered out by your wet lips. A sudden immodest noise made by you behind, and then a bad smell slowly curling up out of your backside. Another letter from December 9, 1909. You had an ass full of farts that night, darling, and IFCKED them out of you. Big fat fellows, long windy ones, quick little merry cracks, and a lot of tiny little naughty farties ending in a long gush from your hole. You really have to admire that relationship. James Joyce had a weird fetish for farts and poop, and in an era long before the internet, random Craigslist hookups, Tinder, our FetLife, he still managed to find a partner who was cool indulging that weird kink for him. God bless and keep you, Jim and Nora. Not quite a historical figure, but John Pemberton, the inventor of Coca-Cola, did so because he was chronically addicted to morphine and was trying to get off of it. Original ingredients were cocaine, famously, sugar, alcohol, and caffeine. He was trying to supplant his other addiction. It did not work. So another thing about Pemberton that I learned very recently was that he served as a lieutenant colonel in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. His morphine addiction you were talking about was actually something he developed after being stabbed with a sword during a battle. Nancy Reagan was the throat goat well known in Hollywood for her oral sex abilities before getting with Reagan. What a fucking reply, damn. Even if it's true or nah, damn, never thought I'd see Nancy Reagan and throat goat in the same sentence. I see you were not on Twitter on the magical day that it was trending then. Napoleon liked it dirty. I shall be alone and far, far away. But you are coming, aren't you? You are going to be here beside me, in my arms, on my breast, on my mouth? Take wing and come a kiss on your heart, and one much lower down, much lower. He understood what was up. Ziggy piggy, ziggy piggy, ziggy piggy. John Quincy Adams boasted that outdoor boning was an American invention. Between that, his pet alligator, and a life spent in public service, literally from his teenage years until his death, probably far more interesting than most people who've held high office in the USA. Also swam nude in the Potomac, daily, when he was president. Gandhi slept, literally, alongside naked girls to test his celibacy. Not just naked girls, he slept with his naked teenage grandniece. Fuck, that's so fucking weird. Cleopatra's nickname from Caesar was Golden Mouth. You can guess why. She was fluent in 7+ languages, a notably talented orator and debater, and had an extensive knowledge of philosophy, history, economics, and politics. So you're saying she was a cunning linguist? Hitler was a meth addict. This is something that I find to be kinda strange about my history classes growing up. We didn't study World War II every year, but when we did, it was always brought up that Churchill was a drunk and FDR repealed prohibition, but Hitler never drank or smoked. Then years after I graduated from high school, I learned that Hitler was a massive drug addict who took meth to rile himself for rallies and heroin to calm himself down afterward. The history around the Nazis and drugs was kept secret for a long time. Really last 20 years or so we learned more and more about it. It was kept such a secret because the Allies did the same thing. More on that. Keep reading. The Allies realized the Nazis were far more ahead in pharmacology, but they only understood their power during French campaign. Soldiers were not resting as they were taking Pevitin, modern meth. Nazis really loved this drug because it not only made you work non-stop, it made you a killing machine. No remorse. Pervitin was a pre-war drug initially marketed as a coffee replacement law. The Nazis sorta stumbled onto it. They had an insane drug program. That's a whole other story. Hitler's drug abuse began around 1941, but this was in small doses than you'd expect. He did take vitamin shots, but slowly his physician would introduce opioids. Hitler was aided by his personal physician and nutcase, Dr. Morrill. He would administer cocaine eye drops in the AM to wake him up. But it was even crazier. In 1941 Hitler was taking steroids, but not just any. Oh no. Morrill was really into giving steroids of animal products. He manufactured concoctions of animal organs in his own lab in occupied Czechoslovakia and gave them to Hitler. Hitler was the modern oxy addict. In fact, he was taking the Eucodal. He got hard into oxy when after the last attempt on his life failed. This is when Hitler got into cocaine too. Hitler was doing speedballs, fucking guy. Morrill would make a X when he would administer the cocktail. Many think Hitler had Parkinson's at the end of the war. But he fired Morrill, and I think he was actually suffering withdrawals more than anything. Anyways, it's really wild. Not to mention, the British only found out the Nazis were using Pervitin, meth, when a plane crashed and it was discovered. This would lead to the British, and USA, developing and deploying the amphetamine, Benzedrine. That's right, the Allies were doing benzos. But they amped shit up by giving soldiers cocaine too. Speedballs for everyone. After the war, the effects of giving people these drugs long term became apparent. Instead of admitting fault, the military covered the program up and it was forgotten until recently. About 0.5% of the world's men, or 16 million men, are descendants of Genghis Khan. He was such a brutal leader that took over most of East Asia, and along the way took innumerable women as well. Supposedly, Genghis liked women with small noses, long hair, and nice voices. He was known to rape the wives of defeated peoples in front of them. I sort of feel icky even typing this. This is a misunderstanding of a study. 16 million men probably have an identifiable Y chromosome that was probably Genghis's, and also his brothers and various cousins etc. Billions of people are probably descended from Genghis. But, to be fair, if you go back about 1,000 years, an average dude could easily be hitting hundreds of millions. Here's the original study. Anyone has any questions I can try and answer them. Sigmund Freud loved cocaine. He wrote a book on how it helped cure mental illness. In it he talks about a patient who he recommended do a buttload of cocaine. She died and he basic was like. He was also Jewish and escaped Austria to France during WW2. I'd imagine if you're depressed and unable to get out of bed, cocaine will do the trick pretty well. If you ever bought sea monkeys, you've helped the KKK buy machine guns. Those damn things really wrecked my belief in magical things when I was little. I saved up and bought them mail-in from my Archie comic. Mom could have given me a heads up they were brine shrimp and not magical monkeys. Damn clan cunts, they wreck everything.